It's the morning of September 16th, 1992. In a modest office in Midtown Manhattan, a man is on the phone. He's calm, almost bored. Outside his window, New York is waking up. Taxis, coffee carts, the usual noise. But in London, 5 hours ahead, something is already breaking. The man on the phone says 4 words to his portfolio manager: go for the jugular. His name is George Soros. And before this day is over, he will have made over $1 billion in a single trade, in a single day. The British government will lose £3 billion trying to stop him, and they will fail. The trap is already set. To understand what happened on Black Wednesday, you have to go back 2 years. It's 1990. Britain has just joined something called the European Exchange Rate Mechanism, the ERM. The idea is simple. European countries agree to keep their currencies tied to each other within a fixed band. Stable currencies, stable trade, the first step toward a unified Europe. Britain joins at a rate of 2.95 Deutsche Marks to the pound. From the start, economists are skeptical. That rate is too high. Britain's economy is weak, inflation is 3 times Germany's, and unemployment is rising. To keep the pound strong enough to stay in the ERM, Britain has to keep interest rates high, painfully high, which means mortgages are expensive, businesses can't borrow. The economy is being strangled to maintain a number on a spreadsheet. Inside the British Treasury, junior economists are already writing memos. The pound is overvalued, the memos say. Something will have to give. The government ignores them. George Soros does not. The man with a theory. Soros is 61 years old in 1992. He was born in Hungary, survived the Nazi occupation of Budapest, fled to England with nothing, and eventually built one of the most successful hedge funds in the world, the Quantum Fund. But what makes Soros different isn't his money. It's his philosophy. He has a theory he calls reflexivity. The idea is that markets don't just reflect reality, they shape it. If enough people believe a currency is going to fall, they sell it. That selling makes it fall, which makes more people sell. The belief creates the outcome. In the spring of 1992, Soros looks at the British pound and sees it clearly. The currency is a trap, and the British government has locked itself inside it. He starts building a position, quietly, over months, borrowing pounds, selling them, betting they'll be worth less when he has to pay them back. By September, his short position is worth $1.5 billion. He's ready to wait. Then, on the evening of September 15th, someone hands him the trigger. The offhand remark that broke a country Helmut Schlesinger is the president of Germany's central bank, the Bundesbank. On the evening of September 15th, he sits down for what he believes is an off-the-record interview with a financial journalist. He says casually that 1 or 2 currencies in the ERM may still come under pressure, even after recent adjustments. He is not talking specifically about Britain. He is speaking generally. He thinks he is speaking privately. He is wrong on both counts. By morning, his words are on every newswire in the world. The financial markets read it as a direct signal. Germany will not prop up the pound. Soros reads it over his morning coffee. Then he calls his portfolio manager. Go for the jugular. He increases his short position from $1.5 billion to $10 billion. Overnight, he borrows and sells pounds faster than most nations could even count them. Other hedge funds, watching Soros move, pile in behind him. The pound begins to fall. The longest day. In London, the government realizes what is happening. At 8:30 in the morning, the Bank of England starts buying pounds, trying to hold the currency up by flooding the market with demand. They spend £300 million in the first few minutes alone. It doesn't work. The pound keeps falling. At 10:30 in the morning, Chancellor Norman Lamont makes a dramatic announcement. The Bank of England is raising interest rates from 10% to 12%. This is meant to make the pound more attractive to hold. It is also a sign of desperation. Traders barely flinch. They know Britain can't sustain 12% interest rates, not in the middle of a recession, not with millions of people carrying mortgages. The selling continues. At 2:15 in the afternoon, Lamont announces a second rate hike, this time to 15%. 15%. Think about what that means for ordinary people. Every mortgage in Britain, millions of families, would wake up the next morning paying half again what they paid the day before. It still doesn't work. By the afternoon, the Bank of England is spending up to £2 billion per hour buying its own currency. They are burning through the country's foreign exchange reserves in real time, and the pound is lower with every single purchase. Soros, meanwhile, is watching from New York. He later said, when Norman Lamont announced he would borrow $15 billion to defend the pound, we were amused, because that was about how much we wanted to sell. At 7 in the evening, Lamont walks outside to face the press. His face is gray. His voice is flat. Britain is withdrawing from the European exchange rate mechanism. The pound will float freely. It's over. The bill. In the days after Black Wednesday, the pound falls 15% against the Deutsche Mark and 25% against the US dollar. The British Treasury will later calculate its losses at £3.3 billion, spent in a single day trying to hold a line that could not be held. Soros made over £1 billion in profit in one day from a phone call, a borrowed position, and a theory about how markets work. The British press gives him a nickname that will follow him for the rest of his life: the man who broke the Bank of England. What it cost. Real people here is what financial history tends to skip over. On the morning of Black Wednesday, there were millions of people in Britain with variable rate mortgages. When the Bank of England announced rates were going to 15%, those people had one thought: how do I pay this? Some had already stretched themselves to buy a home during the Thatcher boom years. Some had just taken out loans to start businesses. Some were weeks away from losing their jobs. By evening, the rate hike was canceled, but the damage was done. Consumer confidence collapsed. The recession deepened. Unemployment kept rising. The Conservative Party, which had campaigned on economic competence, never recovered. 5 years later, in 1997, they suffered their worst election defeat in decades. One man's perfect trade, a country's lost decade. The strange ending. Here's where the story gets complicated, because in the long run, Britain was fine. Once the pound was allowed to float freely, interest rates could finally come down. Exports became cheaper. The economy slowly recovered. By 1997, GDP growth was nearly 5%. Some economists now argue that Black Wednesday was actually a good thing for Britain, that the ERM was the trap, not Soros. That all he did was force the government to admit what its own economists had been saying for 2 years. Soros himself said later that he didn't break the pound. He said the pound was already broken. He just noticed it first. Maybe that's true, but there is something uncomfortable about the idea that a single private citizen operating from a midtown Manhattan office, armed with a theory and a borrowed $10 billion, could make a decision that altered the financial lives of millions of people who had no idea his fund existed. No vote was taken. No parliament debated it. No citizens were consulted. The market decided, and the market that day was mostly one man. What happened next? In 1997, a French court convicted Soros of insider trading related to a separate deal in the 1980s. He was fined €2.2 million, roughly what he made in the first 90 seconds of Black Wednesday. He continued trading for decades. His net worth today is estimated at over $7 billion. Helmut Schlesinger, the German banker whose offhand comment sparked the crisis, later wrote, "I regret to this day that a general remark by myself should have played a role in aggravating Sterling's position." He also noted quietly that Soros had met with him privately just days before the interview. That detail was never fully explained. Norman Lamont, the chancellor who walked outside to announce Britain's humiliation on the steps of the Treasury, was fired 8 months later. He did not receive $1 billion. The rules that govern how much money a single person can move through global currency markets remain, to this day, largely the same as they were in 1992. The trade is still legal. The playbook still works. Nobody has changed it.